I don't think it's premature to start discussing FAMU potentially clinching the SWAC East, and here's the way that they can do it. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth to the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day and going on this journey with me. Please remember that just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is jam-packed. We have a bunch of SWAC stuff because tomorrow's episode is big time MEAC conversations. We wrap up the episode with a little bit of Division II, actually, and about Lincoln, Pennsylvania, and their already historic season. Prior to that, Southern is ranked number 4 in the NCAA HBCU polls, and I kind of have a little bit of a question about that. But before any of it, FAMU's path to clinching is actually pretty cut and dry, and it's obvious exactly what the Rattlers need to do in order to make sure that they get to the SWAC championship. I'll be honest. If FAMU doesn't make it to the SWAC championship game this year, we need to start having a conversation of if they will ever do it, because they kind of have a little bit of a reputation of being a step away from the Celebration Bowl every year. And I know we're only discussing the SWAC championship right now. It's one step at a time. But the last 2 seasons that they've been in the SWAC, they've been a step away from the SWAC championship game. So that's kind of been the hurdle that they needed to get through. And it was something I discussed towards the beginning of the year. That's their hurdle. The hurdle is the Celebration Bowl. The hurdle is getting past. It wasn't just getting past Jackson State. It was getting to the SWAC championship and getting to the Celebration Bowl. That's one big hurdle. And Jackson State was really just a part of it. So you still have to make sure that you can get to your championship game. That's the way that I look at it. And this isn't about preseason expectations or anything of the sort. Yes, I did believe that FAMU, this was their year. I believe that coming into the season. I believe that today. But this isn't about preseason expectations. It's more so about where they currently stand now in relation to their peers. So FAMU is the only undefeated team in the conference. But most specifically, they're the only undefeated team in the SWAC East. And you have Alabama State, Alabama A&M, and Jackson State. All 3 of those teams are 2 games behind FAMU in that division. So now we're at the point where we can start discussing what FAMU needs to do to make sure that they are no longer players. We're now at a point where some of those teams are going to become mathematically eliminated from SWAC championship contendership, right? Because I said this about about Jackson State yesterday, that they're not quite mathematically eliminated, but their chances are slim to none. And I don't think what needs to happen will happen. But FAMU can make sure there's no path. There's no way for it to happen. The pivotal team in this matchup, in those 3 teams, I should say, for FAMU is Alabama A&M. Because that's the only team they haven't played. They played Jackson State, beat them. They played Alabama State, beat them. They have not played Alabama A&M. So that's the pivotal team on the road to clinching this division. However, the road does not start at Alabama A&M. The road starts this Saturday in Houston, and I'll be at that game. So if you FAMU, you out there, you Texas Southern, you out there, let me know, holla at me. I'll try to stop by the section if you tell me what section that you're in. So, but I will be in that game. I'll be in the press box, of course, but ain't nothing to walk out. That being said, FAMU should win this game. Then they go to Prairie View, and FAMU should win that game. Now, I believe that FAMU is the best team in the SWAC. I believe they're the best team in the conference, not just their division, but the best team in the conference. So I really feel like they should probably beat everybody. But I feel as if a high-powered offense is the type of team that could beat FAMU. That's not Texas Southern. That's not Prairie View. I don't think they have that kind of offense. And it would be a big upset if they were to win that game against the Rattlers. But that third game, that's against Alabama A&M, the top scoring offense in the SWAC. And I've had some conversation, or excuse me, questions about them, and we've had those conversations on the show. But they are the number one scoring offense in the SWAC. That's something that you cannot and I will not take from them in what they've been able to do. So that's the type of offense that I'm talking about, being able to knock off FAMU. The key for the Rattlers is you need to make it to this Alabama A&M game still undefeated. That's key because that's the pivotal matchup. That's the team that you really need to make sure that they're not getting closer to you, because you got your eye, of course, but you can't look in the rear view too much because you control your own destiny at this point. So you don't need to look behind you. When you're looking behind you, you're going to miss on what's in front of you. And you miss what's in front of you, they might trip you up. And now the thing that you were looking at behind you is closer to you than they needed to be. And if you would have done what you needed to do, they would have kept the same distance and you actually could have pushed them back. So instead of just speaking in analogies and kind of like metaphors and whatnot, basically what I'm saying is you don't want to lose to Texas Southern. You don't want to lose to Prairie View A&M, because when you face Alabama A&M, you have the potential to clinch the division in that game no matter what. And that's the team that really, you beat Alabama State, like I said. You beat Jackson State, like I said. So all you need to do is not lose 3 games. Once you win the next 2 games, they're done. If FAMU beats if FAMU beats Texas Southern and FAMU beats Prairie View, Jackson State and Alabama State are mathematically eliminated from SWAC championship contendership. Period. But Alabama A&M isn't. So at that point, then you have to play them. And my thing about them is that you need to either beat them or hope they lose before you. They play 1 game before they play FAMU, right? Before the A&Ms face off, you have 1 team that Alabama is going to face, and that's the Magic City Classic. If they lose that game and you win your first 2, you're good. You know, a matter of fact, let's just make it cut and dry. And I believe we're starting to get close enough to the end of the season, about a month left in the season, month and a half left, where we can start talking about clinching. And FAMU's road to clinching is really cut and dry. We've talked about it at length, but let's sum it up pretty easily. You win 3 of your last 4 conference games. Doesn't matter who you beat and who you lost to, but if you win 3 of the last 4 games, you are the SWAC East champion. Now let's get to the earliest way you could do it. If you win the next 2 games against Texas Southern and against Prairie View A&M, and then Alabama State is able to knock off Alabama A&M, FAMU is now your SWAC East champions. That means by the end of the month, you actually can have a SWAC East champion and know half of the SWAC championship game already. But let's say that doesn't happen. The Magic City Classic goes the way of Alabama A&M. That's fine. You still need to win your next 2 games against PV, TSU, but then you need to beat Alabama A&M. And if you win those 3 games, doesn't matter what happens against Bethune-Cookman. The pressure is off of you. You win the next 3 games is very similar to the first way I mentioned, which is win 3 of the last 4. That's just winning your first 3 and also knocking off your biggest competitor in Alabama A&M, because that's the only one of the 3 teams that are right behind you that you haven't beat yet. Those are the paths for FAMU to win the SWAC East. Cut and dry, right? Now, as we move forward, we have a team that's trying to meet FAMU yet again, but it's trying to meet FAMU in the SWAC championship this time. That's the Southern Jaguars. And for me, having them at number 4 in the NCAA HBCU rankings is a tad bit high. And I'll tell you why and what they need to do to justify that in my mind as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the number 1 place for every single small business owner. And I understand that nowadays, every single small business feels like they're having a high stakes wager whenever they try to get a new employee. But let me tell you something about a new employee. You ever seen a football team, they get a new player and all of a sudden things just skyrocket for them? You see what happened with the Eagles when they got A.J. Brown? That's the type of difference that going to LinkedIn can make. That's the type of difference that happens when you find the right fit for your team, when you find the right fit for a department that now everybody in these other departments, they ain't got to lean this away. They ain't got to lean that away. They can just focus on their job. LinkedIn helps you find those people at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. It's simple and it's free. Post your job for free. No harm, no risk, all reward. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free with the hashtag purple or the purple hashtag hiring frame and get in touch with the 800 million people who are on LinkedIn on a daily basis at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Today's episode, or as we continue rolling with today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. And remember, on Friday, we will have our college football kickoff live, helping you become a smarter and more informed football fan. It's not just the HBCUs, it's also all of the things going on around the nation. And we're going to have it right here on the Locked on HBCU podcast page and the YouTube page after the fact, but you can catch it live on YouTube. The NCAA HBCU rankings are something that we typically do on Wednesday, but I have something special for you on Wednesday. We're going to look at the state of the MEAC. So I want to go ahead and push it up because the one thing that I saw about this that caught my eye was Southern. And Southern was at 4. I'm not quite comfortable saying that Southern is the 4th best HBCU in the nation because I'm not quite sure that they're the 4th best HBCU in the SWAC. I'm just being honest with you. And that might sound harsh, but they got a lot to prove to me. And they need to prove that they are deserving of this spot. Because in my humble opinion, I feel as if Southern is 4, that requires me to use a little bit of foresight. Or that just means that the rest of the teams below 4 aren't that good. Harsh. I know. But that's really how I feel. Right. So it's not really harsh to me. It's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine about a certain artist, and I was like, you're extremely disrespectful when it comes to discussing this artist. But I understand that you would never understand why I feel like you're disrespectful because that's your genuine opinion. So to me, it might come off harsh, but I mean that for real. So I'm not really being harsh about it, right? I'm not adding on top of it. I'm just saying that that Southern has played good teams. They haven't won. Why I keep on calling FAMU? Southern has had offensive struggles all year long. So if that's the case, I just don't feel comfortable putting them at 4. Those are my 2 big reasons for that. And look, I understand that the Southern offense just put up, 45 against Lincoln of California? But it's Lincoln of California. Uh, I'm not going to knock you for doing what you're supposed to do against those you're supposed to do it against, but I'm also not praising you for it. And if that makes me a hater, like, fine, I'll be buck nasty if that's really what it comes down to. But I just need to see more than lighten up Lincoln, California. That's not going to do it for me. And I can acknowledge that I did say that Southern is improving in their game against FAMU. But improving and being the number 4 team in the nation amongst all HBCUs is completely different. Improving and feeling as if the offense all of a sudden has found their groove, not the same thing. And if they're going to find their groove, I need to see them find their groove against more than just Lincoln, California. That does not work for me. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't prove enough for me. So I need it on a consistent basis. That's number 1. Even if they were able to do it against, they would have to do it against an Alabama State, a FAMU. Like, they would have to do it against one of those defenses that I just think is rock solid. Then I would take 1 performance. Other than that, I'm going to need 2, 3 performances in a row. And then also you look at the other big problem I had is they're not beating quality opponents. Who's the quality victory on Southern's record? Is it Alabama A&M? Maybe. I have my questions about them as well. But when we're looking at the teams that we felt were potential championship contenders, they haven't played any of them in the SWAC West. They haven't played a single one of those teams we thought could be a championship contender in the SWAC West. Looking at the SWAC East, they played Alabama State. They lost. They played Jackson State. They lost. They played FAMU. They lost. Those are all of the championship contenders in the SWAC. Either they faced them and they lost, or they haven't faced them yet. Now, one of my favorite quotes is the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. But here's the thing here. We don't have an absence of evidence, but we do have an evidence of absence. So it's not, oh, they haven't played teams. If they just weren't playing good teams, I'm not going to knock them for it. Like, okay, you just haven't had that opportunity. But you have had that opportunity. And the absence is that you are not, or the evidence is that you are absence of victories. That's what it is. There's a sample size that I've looked at, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but until Southern starts stringing together productive offense, until Southern faces a team that I believe is quality and they knock them off, how can I really sit here comfortably and say that they are the number 4 team in the nation as far as HBCUs go, and not either say you're requiring foresight to say that the offense is going to get it together? Okay, fine. Or the teams below them just aren't performing well. It has to be one of the two, right? It has to be. Because with how they performed thus far, I can't see any other reason. You telling me that they've won 3 of the last 4, but the game they lost was against FAMU, a championship team. So you got Jackson State right behind them, and Jackson State beat Southern earlier this year. They've lost to Alabama State, and they lost to Jackson, or they've lost to Alabama State, and they lost to FAMU. Guess who Southern's lost to? Alabama State, FAMU, and Jackson State. So I'm just not quite comfortable saying that JSU should be behind them. I don't know. Like, I'm still high on Alcorn. I'm still high on PV. I understand Gramblin's lost back to back, so I get why they would be below Southern. Maybe even Prairie View for how they lost to Houston Christian. But Alcorn had a bye week, and the last time we seen them, they knocked off a red hot Grambling. Big separation between Southern and Alcorn on this list, though. Not quite a fan of it. Not to compare those to others. Look at Southern alone. 2 big problems. They've lost too many games to the actual good teams, haven't won enough of them. Lost every single one, if we just can be honest, right? Let's not tap dance around it. And then also, the offense just hasn't strung anything together. I love the defense. I know I'm kind of late in saying that. All the Southern fans then probably typed up the angry comments at me, but I love the defense. I just want the offense to get it together. If the offense gets it together, Southern is a legitimate championship contender. Period. If the offense gets it together, they can beat FAMU. Those are the type of things that I'm seeing out of them. They just got to do it. And I'm not putting them at number 4 using my foresight of it happening. Maybe Stan is. But as we move forward, let's move to the D2 ranks because Lincoln, Pennsylvania is already having a historic season. Even if it were in today, it would still be a historic season. So let's break it down and get into that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and I love me some good daily fantasy. All you have to do is pick the sport. NBA is kicking in. I just seen Wembanyama dunk on a dude from outside the restricted area. You know, the WNBA, almost said Super Bowl, the WNBA finals is going on right now. Game 4 is going to be Wednesday. The NFL is constantly going on, including a game this Thursday that's coming up. College football is here. You have all of these players to pick the more or the less with. Points, yards, touchdowns, interceptions, everything. Are they going to go above that number or below that number? The more or the less? Which one are you picking? And you know, Prize Picks offers payouts on Apple Pay so you can get it like that in a snap. Daily fantasy made easy. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. And when you use the code lockedoncollege, you can get up to $100 matched on your first deposit. That is prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. And if you use the code lockedoncollege, you will get $100 back on your or matched on your first deposit. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Every dayers, segment 3, folks. Look, I'm using a different microphone today. I'm doing a handheld, so I'm really going to watch today's episode at some point to see exactly how the sound's been. Watch to see if the mic is moving away from me, see what the range of the mic is, and we're gonna get this together so that when I do travel, we can do things with the microphone and we can do maybe live shows at some point. You might just see me recording from a hotel one time instead of one of my home studios, right? So it's just things like that you might see on the show. Just giving you a little bit of a tease, right? But here we go. You have Lincoln, who is already in the midst of a historic season. If the season were to end today, they would have the most wins since they have reopened the program in 2008. Now, this one is special to me, A, because I love stories like this, but B, our guy, friend of the show, a guy I really do rock with and care about. Coach G is on this coaching staff, and he's been a part of the turnaround. So shout out to him. 3 straight for Lincoln. 4 games on a season already. And I know for some that might not sound like much, but when you look at what they've been going through, and I'm sorry, Lincoln fans, for digging you back into this dark place, but I just have to do it to illustrate how special this season is so far. First and foremost, this is the first year under Frank Turner. He's a new head coach. That turnaround that he's making right now is a big part of what this story is. This isn't a head coach who's been there for 5 years. Like, oh man, what's going on? This is something when you have a first year head coach and you go through this, right? If he were a coach that had been there for a couple of years, you might be like, wow, where did this come from? Might be skeptical. I don't know. But with Frank Turner being a first year head coach and the turnaround that he has led Lincoln on so far, it gives a lot of happiness and it gives a lot of optimism on what the future can look like. Now, you go through 2022, last year, they won 2 games. The year prior to that, they won 1 game. The year prior to that, so 2019, actually, because of COVID and whatnot, you won 0 games. 2018, you win 1 game. So I have to go back 22, 21, 19, 18. I have to go back 4 seasons to total 4 wins. And Lincoln was able to do that in this year alone, and it's not even over. They're currently 4-3. They're probably searching, saying, you know, we want to end with a winning record. That's going to be very difficult. You have Virginia Union, you have Virginia State, then you have Bowie State. With Union and Virginia State, you're looking at 2 teams at the top of the division that Lincoln is reaching up to try to get to. Union has 1 loss, State has no losses. You're looking at I don't want to say gauntlet because there's only 2 games, but a definitely tough back-to-back run. Like, that's not easy. And you could see them struggling. Like, you could see them losing those games. But they need 1 game to be 500. They need 2 games to have a winning record. And I'll say this. And I don't like to always do this, but I'm rooting for them. I have no dog in the race out there. And, you know, I'm not sitting here saying that they'll win the division or they'll win the conference or anything like that. But when you see what they've been able to do, when you see the turnaround, and when you see my guy, Coach G, out there, I'm rooting for them to do everything. I'm rooting for them to win the next 3 games. And if that winning the next 3 games, which will put them at 7-3, by far their best season. They've hit 3 wins in 2 seasons, most recently 2015. But if they hit 7 victories, they even hit 5 or 6, especially that number 6, and that means a winning record. You could say that a winning record at 6-5. I would be really happy for them because I think it's a big deal. It's a sign of a turnaround. Forget my allegiances and forget my relationships. That's just a turnaround for what they've been able to do in this program. And also, let me highlight Isaiah Freeman, because in the midst of this 3-game stretch, this 3-game winning streak that they just went on, right? By the way, right before that, 2 games prior, because they played 2 close games, but 2 games prior to their winning streak, they pushed Fayetteville State, who was undefeated, to the wire, where Fayetteville State had to kick the game-winning field goal with time expiring. Yeah, so like, this is a team that's been heating up, and now they're really getting hot, and they won 3 in a row. And Isaiah Freeman has been lights out. He's had his 2 highest passing totals, with one being over 300 yards, 370. In this stretch, he's had his 2 highest. You're looking at a game where he's thrown 1 interception. That's it. After throwing an interception in every game prior to the winning streak, he's only thrown 1 interception, and he's had 12 total touchdowns, 11 through the air. I'm not reading off stats, but I'm just telling you, this is a guy who has turned his game up a notch. He's had a 5-touchdown game through the air. This is a guy who has been hooping on a different level during this 3-game stretch. And you would want to continue that because, like I said, you're going against State. You're going against Virginia Union. Like, you're going against very difficult teams that you're going to need your quarterback to step up and play at a high level when it's happening. He was the leading rusher in 2 of the 3 games. He's been everything for that squad, specifically against Winston-Salem State and well, it's not Claflin. Winston State. Is it Shaw? I can't remember who the second game was, but that was a shootout. It was 52-44. But you're looking at 2 really big time victories in 2 games in which Isaiah Freeman was playing out of his mind. So I think he deserves a lot of credit and a lot of love, and we're going to do that here. And I appreciate the love that comes from you. I'm able to give all of these players and these teams love because of what you're able to do for me and giving me love. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every single day. I love my everydayers sincerely. And until tomorrow, when we discuss the state of the MEAC, take care. Stay blessed. Peace. Oh, I got a microphone, so I got one hand. Peace. And drop it down and click the button, baby.